text from one of my high school buddies this morning. We were just talking about some challenges and overcoming challenges. And he said that, I'll quote this, when you unlock the key to the next level of your own success, keep in mind, with that next level, there's another devil around the corner. There's always someone or something that wants to test you. And they're around every corner. Every time you climb that next rung, right, there's the next challenge. So how do you stay focused knowing that? How do you know that? How do you go forward and climb to that next rung knowing there's going to be another challenge, even though you just completed one back there?
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Grit Meets Growth podcast, where we bring you inspiration and insights focused on getting uncomfortable, making things happen, and creating a magnetic life. If you enjoy the messages you're hearing here, please leave us a review on whatever platform you're listening on, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of the podcast. With that, let's get after it. Hey guys, before we get started, I just want to tee this up quick. This episode is the second half of our conversation with Deena Ebbert. If you haven't heard the first half of the conversation, I'd invite you to go back to episode 46, check it out. Second half is going to be awesome, so we're just going to dig right in. Hope you love the episode. Like I said, check out the first episode with Deena if you haven't heard it already, but otherwise, let's just get after it.
When you unlock the key to the next level of your own success, keep in mind, with that next level, there's another devil around the corner. There's always someone or something that wants to test you. And they're around every corner. Every time you climb that next rung, right, there's the next challenge. So how do you stay focused knowing that? How do you know that? How do you go forward and climb to that next rung knowing there's going to be another challenge, even though you just completed one back there?
I think this because we're all wired a little bit differently. One of the things that I like to do for fun, which I haven't gotten to do for a couple of years because COVID came and my coping mechanism was not conducive to this. But before that, I spent a lot of time doing obstacle course races, mud runs. I love it. I love the next one. If I come through the big gloppy, pit of mud, I want to go see what the next thing is, because that's fun for me. That sine wave of adrenaline that happens in those experiences is really fun for me. But I think eventually, if we look at maybe life being like that obstacle course, there's going to be an obstacle that's going to hit you and you're going to go, this one, I got nothing on this one. Like this particular one, I got nothing on this one, and I needed a rest. I need to go around it this time. I need to learn more about it. So I need to build a specific skill set so I can handle that more effectively. I need to address either a weakness of spirit, maybe I'm afraid, or a weakness in my own resilience. Maybe I'm not very good at, that particular athletic pursuit. So how do you face down the devil that's around the next corner? I don't know, write "Not Today, Satan" on your t-shirt and go through, not your day, and I am not the one. So
not today.
I'm going to ask you a question about that, Deena.
Yeah.
And we can cut this if you don't want to talk about it.
Okay.
But I feel like, so your career up until COVID was you're a speaker. Like you speak in front of large groups of people all over the country and like everywhere, right? Like that's your thing.
Yeah.
And then COVID hits and that rug gets pulled right out from under you.
Oh.
Can you talk a little bit about resilience through that? And if you're comfortable, as long as you're comfortable with it.
Yeah, you bet. Because I think that I'm finally at the point where there's enough time and distance between what, a worldwide pandemic that I had no control over, to today that I can talk about it because I've had that time. But I was completely shocked and surprised. I guarantee you, I am not the only person who was shocked and surprised when industries shifted and changed, and some of them shut down permanently, some of them shut down temporarily. But I was traveling worldwide all the time, and just doing crazy, impossible things. I had a reputation for doing what's called the impossible show. So if somebody said, hey, can you leave 2 hours and can you do this show? It's a triple shift. So we need somebody in the morning, somebody after lunch, and somebody in the middle of the night. Can you do those 3 speeches? I'm like, yes, I'll just sleep in the break room in between. So I was surviving on the adrenaline that I have, and then all of the neurotransmitters of happiness that were happening when I was doing a job that I absolutely love. And when it went away, the absence of all of that adventure feeling, because I had all that adventure feeling, and the absence of being of use, because I don't put my feet on the floor in the morning until I know that I can go be useful. But all of a sudden, what was I going to do? So in the absence of all of those feelings and the lack of purpose and the sense of not knowing what would happen, from a career perspective, I picked some dumb coping mechanisms to get through that. And I joke about it all the time. And John, you know exactly what I'm going to say. So this is my kitchen. That's my basement. And it's called the creepy basement. And that's where, Propeller Girl Central is. I spent a lot of time, because there was no work to do, I spent a lot of time downstairs crying in a box of industrial sized Cheez-Its and drinking directly from the tap of a box of rosé. Like, blah, 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 and not really, but when I tell you that, you can see that, because we have all cried in our Cheez-Its, and we have all done things to self-soothe when things not only just didn't, go our way, but kind of came to a grinding, stunning, crashing halt. The nice thing was, even though my career went on a massive hold, that my social interaction amped up, because I realized, a lot like Chris was saying earlier in our conversation, you've got to have that network, those connections, the people that you reach out to, whether they're people you work with or people that you've connected to through your job over the years. Like John, you and I have known each other for a good long time, and I have just adored you since the instant I met you, because you just have that vibe. So your work connections, or your friends, or your family, or your neighbor. And what I ended up doing was amping up those connections so that I wouldn't be isolated, because there's only so many days in a row that you can cry in a box of Cheez-Its before it gets soggy and you don't want to eat those anymore. And then you smell bad, and you need to take a shower and go be a human being. And you need to shift the coping. We choose sometimes desperate coping mechanisms during a desperate part of our life. And when those lose, they stop being fun or even helpful, turning to other people and saying, how are you? What's going on with you? Are you okay? What do you need? What did you learn? Is there something that I should ask you that I haven't asked you yet? Is there some way that I could, send an encouraging note on a paper airplane out the window and you could drive by and pick it up? So I think resilience is just built, one tiny little victory at a time. Tiny victories stack up to make a mountain. And eventually you find your way out of the creepy basement and back into the light.
But those questions that you just asked, Deena, I would challenge everybody to not look back on those and go, that's how I dealt with it last year. I would challenge you to take those questions and propel yourself forward. Use them today, more so now than ever. That's what's going to help you and the others around you to continue to level up. It's getting people to think critically about their own actions and the actions that you're going to take, right? We have to put some thought to that. And we have to put thought to it in a structure of not just in our head, but actually on paper to go, what are my non-negotiables? What are those things I'm not going to bend on?
Right. And it took me a long time to come to those, because when my career went away, that level of desperation, I started thinking, okay, I'll do anything. When we said a second ago, we said, not today, Satan, but I was like, okay, Satan, is there a contract you want me to sign? What can I do to win it back? Having no control in a situation that is that big, and we start to make these bargains where we maybe peel off little pieces of our self-respect or our incumbent wisdom or our dignity, or the way that we know that we've figured out how to do it in a way that is good, that is healthy, that is winning, that does help other people. When things go away, we start to think, well, maybe I'll bargain with that. And that's the wrong thing to try to bargain with. Resilience is saying no to the I'm going to say the word shit. Resilience is saying no to the bad shit that tries to creep up and drag you down. And sometimes you have to say no to it over and over and over and over again. And sometimes you have to look it in the face and say, oh, no, because there's the no when you're afraid, and then there's the no when you're desperate, and then there's the no when you're building resilience again. And then there's the no when you look and you go, oh no, I don't do that. I don't do that because I don't have to anymore. Because I was able to, with the help of my friends and the people who love me and who are healthy, whether they're friends that I have in person or friends that I've got from a distance, or friends that are in the books that I read that are those sources of wisdom, people that I might not ever meet, but read their wisdom in a book, or whether it's the friend who sings the song on the B-side of the album that I like, that makes me get up and jump around and dance every day. Those are the people that get you through the tough times. And there's a beautiful critical moment when you realize, I'm not crying anymore because I lost something. I'm smiling because I got through that. And that sounds like something that we should embroider on a pillow and sell at Home Goods and put in our cabin. But it's true.
That is such a good description. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I know we've talked about this. I know bits and pieces of the story, but I appreciate you sharing that a ton, because the number of people that we have in our circles who over the last 3 years have gotten kicked in the teeth in so many different ways. We're in the middle of a mental health crisis because people have gotten just wailed on.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of benefit to hearing from people who have walked through the fire and are still walking, and have gotten charred up a little bit along the way and eaten a lot of Cheez-Its and been in the basement, right? But they got out of the basement. There's hope to get out of the basement and put down the box of Cheez-Its.
And the funny thing is, it's hard to know that you're out of it until that moment that you're out of it. And the timing of the question, John, I'm really glad that you asked, is really good, because just last week, I got the call that said, would you come back and do this? And I said, I can't. I'm not capable. And it wasn't directly from the source of despair that had, spiraled me. It wasn't like COVID called me up and said, hello, this is COVID, and we'd like to know if you'd like to reverse your life entirely and go back and do exactly what you're doing. It was a new opportunity. It's, this is this whole new world and way, it's coming. But someone called and said, hey, would you be willing to do what you used to do? And I said, I can't. It doesn't have any integrity, because that was several years ago. And during that time between then and now, because my mentors asked me to do impossible things that I didn't think I could do, I've created something completely different. So no, I can't do what I used to do. I can't do that. But what I will do is bring you everything that I've learned, all of the new stuff, the stuff that was built out of despair and born out of saying no, and the firmaments that were built up by saying yes to new boundaries and asking for different insight. And so I would just love it if there was some way to bottle that and give that to everybody who said, hey, this really rocked my world. Somewhere, if it hasn't already happened for you, I believe with my entire heart that there is a moment when you will get through whatever it is that rocked your world, and you will say, I can't go back and be who I was before then. But what I will do is be me moving forward. And I do have different skills, and I might look a little different, and I might sound, I might speak a language that you're not familiar hearing me, with words that don't seem like some stuff that I would say. But it's because I learned stuff then, and I put that in me. And I kept all the stuff that worked and ditched the stuff that didn't, and let's motor on. So I wish, if I had one wish, it would be for everybody to have that moment, because it's out there.
What you're talking about, grow, evolve, keep the stuff that works, but get rid of what's not. Like everybody, I don't care what you've gone through in the last 3 years, 10 years, whatever. That's like a mantra we should all be grabbing onto. Keep what works, ditch what doesn't. Why carry around what doesn't work and not give yourself room to grow? The fact that you share that you gave yourself room to grow, that you weren't stuck in an identity from 3 years ago, but now you have a new identity and you're going in a different direction based on how you grew through the challenge. Like, bravo all day to that. Like, we haven't talked about that. It's exciting for me to hear that and hear you say that, because that's freaking awesome.
And I think that's happening everywhere. I mean, we're hearing that from all kinds of people, right? We're hearing it in the workforce, and the fact that, there's more and more of the workforce that's becoming fractional, right? Our business at Actelion, serving fractional CISO roles for the mid-market, right? Those types of things, fractional marketing services, whatever it happens to be, right? Those roles are popping up more and more, which allows people to really take a different approach. And organizations are going to continue to take a different approach because of that, right? Gone are the days of everybody being in, 5,000 people on a campus of a large enterprise organization. I just don't know that we'll ever go back to that again. And that causes major disruption and change, but it's also brought a lot of positive, because now it doesn't matter where in the world, where in the United States your organization is, you can tap into those resources anywhere in the country. You no longer have to sit and look at your pool of candidates only being this big. It's this big now. I was having a conversation earlier today with a friend of mine who's working for a company out of Florida. He lives here in Minnesota. Like, how awesome.
So you get a lot more cross-pollination of ideas because the culture in Florida and the culture here may be completely unique. You might be talking to someone who's in a, halfway around the world. And I think people get to bring their own weird, their own unique weirdness now. And I think we're a little bit less homogenized, which is nice. And I'm loving seeing a resurgence of how important it is to bring the interpersonal skills back to the forefront. Talking to people, finding out what is it that makes you weird and interesting. Tell me all about that. I want to know that, because that might be the reason that the way you do your job is so successful. Something that's not on the job description, but it's part of your unique, fun, weird, interesting personality. So we're moving out of this, model of asynchronous communication and back into the, I see your face, I'm listening to your voice. We're actually communicating together now and getting into that real conversation where I can pick up all on, who you are.
Oh, I'm going to ask
I
you
want to
to
step back to a thing that you mentioned earlier about, you don't put your feet on the ground until you know the value that you can bring to that day. How do you structure that? What does that look like for you?
So thanks for asking. And it doesn't need to be the value precisely, but if I can go make a positive difference in the world, it doesn't have to be huge. It can be modest. Like I said, the tiny victories stack up. But what I found is if I get out of bed without understanding that I have a responsibility to bring something somewhere during the day to the world, then I've got purpose. And so, I wake up and I wiggle my toes and I say thank you and I say I am happy, I am safe, I am lucky, I'm gonna get it. Let's go get it. But if I'm feeling miserable and vulnerable in a unsafe way, I don't let myself put my feet on the floor. I will sit on the edge of the bed with my feet hovering above the floor and hold my knees up until I can get my mind right. And because getting out of bed and pouting around all day and making my little sad moment everybody else's problem for the long haul is boring. So I have functional areas that I can work in, proactive quality communication, building my business, next level fitness, whatever that is, taking care of my physical surroundings, whether that's my home or the place where I am currently staying or outside in the nature at large, being fiscally responsible. And then I have one other that I can't think of right now. I'll think of it at some point, but I have areas and I just try to hit at least 3 of those 6 areas every day. So at the end of the day, I've got something to say, all right, good job, me. Yay.
Yep. And for me, I give to myself first thing. So when I get out of the bed, it's a workout, right? It's to the gym. It's a Peloton ride. I'm giving to myself first.
That's good.
And then that is one of my first critical tasks of the day. And then move through, just as you said, whatever other critical task of that day that I need to accomplish. And giving some thought to that before the night before, to say, what is it that I'm going to accomplish tomorrow?
Mm-hmm. Do you write things down? So do you have it in your mind when you go to bed? Tomorrow I'm going to do these 3 things.
I do. I try to, if it's work stuff, I try to have my list written before I leave the night before.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I come in the next day, I review that and maybe change and modify a few things based on however the morning went.
Do you have a regular structured schedule, or do you have a chaotic schedule?
I try to structure it as best as possible. There are days that it's chaotic, but I try to structure as best as possible. Try to be consistent on the time that I get up in the morning. I'm consistent on the time that I get to the office every day. I'm consistent on the time that I get home every day, and I'm consistent on the time that I go to bed. If I can focus on those 4 consistent things in my life, the rest will fall into place.
Right on. What about you, John? Random or consistent?
Hybrid.
Hybrid.
I have certain things that are placed very consistently over the course of the week. And then I have days that are very chaotic and inconsistent, just depending on how meetings stack up, who's available to talk when, just juggling a lot of things. And then you add 2 16-year-olds into the mix, and that adds a level of chaos that can be, depending on the day, chaotic. So yeah, it's a mix for sure. But I think there are things like both of you have talked about. There are things you can do to prime yourself for a good day, making sure your head's in the right spot when you start. Because if it's not, that's going to trail you the rest of the day. And you do something that I do, Chris, spending a little bit of time the day before thinking about what tomorrow is going to look like. At least having some semblance of a plan of what tomorrow looks like before you go to bed. And so it's not just a random surprise when you wake up in the morning, but also with the knowledge and a little bit of grace that might change by 8 o'clock. Like there might be something that I have to shift or switch or move around.
Yeah, you always have to allow for modification of it, but there's a lot of value in knowing what your day tomorrow brings, right? Knowing what's on your calendar. Where do I have to be tomorrow morning? Do I have something on my calendar at 8 o'clock that I need to be across town? Well, that's going to shift my timelines of what normally I would do. But if I don't do that soon enough, then I get caught off guard, and I don't want to be caught off guard. It's not to say that I want to have everything, as we talked about earlier, planned out. I have to allow for time, unplanned time in there, or time to modify or shift. But I have to be looking forward at what's coming at me. It's kind of like when I ride a motorcycle. I have to look through the corner. I can't look right in front of me. I have to look through the corner. It's the only way I'm going to get there.
You go where you look, so look where you go. So if you're staring at the cows, you're going to go in the cows.
Right.
I'm gonna ask a question. So, and it ties to look where you go where you look. You brought up weird and interesting, and you, Deena, are probably one of the best people I know at seeing weird and interesting. You're super curious and you ask good questions. You're known as Propeller Girl, and I've heard the story behind Propeller. Can you talk a little bit through that story? Because I love the story and I'd love for people to hear it.
Oh, yeah. Really?
This is kind of unplanned. We hadn't talked about this, but I've heard the story about where that came from and I love it. So
yeah, this is my origin story.
This is our B-side.
Thank you for asking. This is actually the origin story of why I'm Propeller Girl. And when I'm telling it in groups, one of the things that I ask people to do, so I'm going to ask you to do this, and then anybody who's listening in on the podcast, I would like you, while I'm telling this story, I would like you to think about yourself and what is your origin story? Why are you the way you are? In the most wonderful, weird, exciting, quirky, fascinating way. I moved out to Minnesota from Arizona. So I'm looking out my kitchen window right now and I am seeing that there is nature here. I moved here back in the late 90s. And when I moved, it was February and it was a lot like today. So today it's already snowed about, 4 or 5 inches where I am. And when I'm done with this conversation with you, I'm going to go shovel. But I moved and I was unprepared for the particular weather phenomenon called Minnesota. And the moving van dropped everything off and, went to bed and woke up the next morning, and lo and behold, it looked like a beautiful little Christmas card because everything was all covered in snow and there was lots of it. And I looked out the window and I was kind of getting familiar with the neighborhood, and I could see that the neighbors were very interested and devoted to getting out early and cleaning up that snow. But what was particularly compelling about how they did it was they'd walk out, they'd look at the snow, and instead of the look on my face, which is like, oh, it's a winter wonderland, everybody looked mad. They're just mad. And they had their angry hat on, pulled down, and their grouchy old coat on, and they stomped down with their shovel. But you could tell that it mattered to them that they did it right. And what that meant was cleaning the snow off along their whole sidewalk, and they'd work and 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 make a face and be angry, and they'd get to the invisible barrier between where their property ended and your property started, and they'd make a perfect clean line and not touch any of your snow, just handle theirs. And then they'd get this beautiful smile of satisfaction and joy, and they'd turn around and they'd march back in the house. And at that point, I don't remember which husband it was, but I called upstairs and I said, there's a ton of snow out here. What are we going to do? And that husband said, I don't know. We'll figure it out. And I looked out again. I saw there was a next door neighbor was out on his porch, but he didn't look mad. He looked super, super happy. And, he looked up at the sky like it was refreshing. And he looked at the trees like they were beautiful. And he had his coat on. He was kind of tucked in, and he came down the sidewalk with his shovel. And you could tell he was kind of grooving. He was singing a little song to himself. He was having the time of his life. Like this was his fun, happy exercise. And I watched him, and he shoveled all of his sidewalk, and it looked beautiful. And then when he got to the imaginary line between my property and his property, he ignored it and just kept right on shoveling. And I called up to the husband and I said, honey, there's a man out here shoveling our sidewalk. And he responded, he said, good. And I said, well, come look, because he's got this goofy hat on. And he came down and he looked out the window. He said, you mean the guy with the propeller beanie? And I said, yeah. And he goes, leave him alone. He's weird. And I said, no, I'm going to go out and say hi. So I went out and said hi. And I said, hi. And he said, hi, like I do. And he said, hi. And I said, I'm your neighbor. And he said, I know it. You live in the house next door now. And I said, I do. And he said, you got here last night. I said, I know. Thank you for shoveling my sidewalk. He said, yeah, I figured I'd shovel for you because we've got the snow emergency coming and I don't want you to get a ticket. I'm like, what do you mean a ticket? And he goes, don't you know that you get snow shoveling tickets here? I said, I've never heard of that. I'm from Arizona. And he said, well, clearly. And he said, I got you today. You can get me back next time it snows. And he said, do you have a snow shovel? I said, I don't. And he said, that's okay. Go down 2 blocks this way, 2 blocks that way. There's a little hardware store. You get you a shovel and you can get me back. So I ended up living next door to him for years, like 7 years. And we traded off snow shoveling all the time. The funny thing was, every time I saw him, he was wearing one of those propeller hats, like a ball cap like you've got on, John, but with a propeller on the top. Winter turned to spring, and every time I'd see him leaving for work or coming back, he'd have on the goofy hat. Spring comes and he's out doing the yard cleanup, wearing the propeller hat. Spring turns to summer. They've got the grandkids coming over. They've got an inflatable pool in the backyard. All the grandkids are jumping around, and a couple of the kids are wearing those little goofy hats. And I'm thinking, this is some kind of a weird cult thing. I don't know, but I was curious from the beginning, but how if you're curious and you don't ask the question, that it's gone on too long and it starts to feel weird. So I figured I'd just kind of let it go, and I wouldn't ask why he was always wearing a propeller beanie. And then one night, that first summer, our houses were really little and close together. So I was, looking out the front, and he came out on his front porch, and he had a suit on, and he looked so handsome. And usually I didn't see him wearing a suit. He wore like, painter pants and a t-shirt, because he was in construction and set building and design at some of the theaters. But he had a suit on and he looked fine. And he looked back in the house, and his wife came out on the front porch, and she looked so pretty. She had on this beautiful dress. It was like pale green chiffon. And I'm like, they're going somewhere fancy, and I didn't want to bug them because it looked like they were getting ready to leave. So he held his arm out, and she put her hand on his arm, and he walked her down the sidewalk to the car. And he had a big green Suburban. He opened that door up, and he got her in the car, and he must have said something kind of dirty to her because she blushed. And he closed the door, and then he went to walk around the front of the car to get in the driver's seat. And he must have known that I was spying on him out the window, because, like your nosy neighbor does. Because as he walked around the front of the car, he swept back his jacket, and he pulled out of his back pocket a propeller beanie, and he flipped it open, and he put it on his head, and he turned around, and he looked at me, and he went like this. And then he got in the car and he drove away. And I was like, no, done. No, I have to ask. It's been months and I haven't said it, but I really need to satisfy my curiosity, and I need to know. So I waited. I was going to wait up, to wherever it was that we're going. I think they went to a wedding. And I waited up until 9 o'clock, and they were still not home. So I had to go to bed because that's my bedtime. But the next morning I got up, and I had a cup of coffee, and I went out, and I waited for him. I waited for him, and he came out to get his newspaper, and he was like, "What are you doing waiting in the yard?" And I said, "I just wanted to know if you had fun at the wedding thing that you were at." He goes, "We had fun. We had fun." I said, "You were out late." He said, "We were out till 9:30. He said, 9:30. I said, "That's very late." And he said, "What do you want?" I said, "I just want to say happy Sunday." And he said, "Why don't you ask me what you want to ask me?" And I said, "That's all." And he goes, "Ask it." I go, "Mm-mm." He goes, "Say it." I'm like, "Mm-mm." He goes, "Ask me. You've been dying for months." And I'm like, "What's with the propeller beanie?" And he goes, "This one?" I go, "Oh, no, not that one. You had a different one on last night." He goes, "Yeah, that's my fancy going to a wedding propeller beanie. This is my sit on the front steps with my crazy neighbor propeller beanie." And I said, "How many do you have?" And he said, "Propeller beanies?" I said, "Yeah." Or crazy neighbors. He said, "Oh, I think I just have one crazy neighbor, but I have 152 propeller beanies." I had 152. 152. I said, "Where do you keep them?" He said, "They stack up." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, one day several years ago, we were out shopping for toys for the grandkids, and I saw this display of propeller beanies. I always wanted one of these when I was a little kid, but I never had one because, we didn't have the money for silly stuff like that. It just wasn't in the budget. But then I grew up to be, a man, and I kind of forgot about it. And then I became a grandpa, and I had grandkids, and I started realizing that it's okay to be silly and fun and bring some of that into your life. And I looked at the stack of, the stand with the beanies, and I waited till my wife was on the other side of the store. And I thought, I'm going to buy one. So I got one down by my side, and I started, sneaking over to the checkout counter. And of course, gentlemen, if you don't know this, if you're like sneaking, your woman knows you're sneaking. We know it's just a thing. She said, "What are you doing?" And he held it up. He said, "I want one of these." And she said, "Well, for heaven's sakes, go ahead and buy one." So, I took out some money. I paid $6.99, got my change. And then I took off my regular ball cap, and I put it on my head because I wanted to go out to the car and get in the car and roll the window down on the freeway and see how fast I could get the propeller to go. But between that transaction and getting to the car, we decided to do some other things in the mall. And I forgot I had it on because I wear a ball cap every day. But the funny thing was that people in the mall were so nice to us. Like people would walk past us and smile, and little kids were giggling, and we decided to have lunch, and we got a really good table, and the server was nice. And I forgot, I just thought it was one of those days when people were in a good mood. And it wasn't until much later that I got out to the car and I caught my reflection, and I was wearing the hat. And I thought, is that all it took? Me taking myself a little less seriously and wearing this silly hat. And what did I get in return? I got a response from people that was full of curiosity and joy and laughter and amusement and wonder and all kinds of things, nothing negative, everything unexpected. It felt like a weird day, but it felt wonderful. And then I got in the car and I rolled the window down and got on the freeway, and that propeller went really fast, and I've worn one every day since. And I tell this story a lot, but the part that I don't really talk about is how he mentored me afterward. And he said, I see you. You come and go, and you look hurried, and you look worried, and you leave really early in the morning, and you come home really late. And sometimes I see you sitting on the back deck when you should be relaxing, and you look like you're stressing. He said, I think that you take your suit too seriously. And I think that you are limiting who you can be because you're not giving yourself permission to be weird. And over time, we had so many conversations that were like that. The first time someone says you take your suit too seriously, and that's how you're, paying the mortgage, it feels a little bit like a challenge that you don't want to fight. Yeah, I take it seriously because I got to pay the mortgage. But over time, he chipped away at some of the really narrow margins that I had created for myself and gave me permission to go ahead and just be a weirdo. And it was one of the longest mentoring situations I've ever had. And what I learned from him is, we get to have these moments where we redefine ourselves by the joy that we see in the faces of the people around us. And if that's something that, if I'm going to put my feet on the floor and be useful to the world, if all I do is give one person, whether I know them or I just see them walking by on the street, or if I'm nice to them in the grocery store, or I send them a cute message on the text, if that's all I achieve all day, then that day was a win, because I'm not taking myself as seriously as the black suit that I wore to work every day until it fell off in shreds. And I was reborn, a phoenix of sparkly unicornness. The end. Kinda. To be continued.
To be continued.
Yeah.
But I think that's so important to talk about the joy that you bring others. It's my friends and I, we look at each other often and say, who has more fun than us?
Right.
Because it's a constant laugh fest. Like my sides are hurting constantly when we're together. And we do cool stuff and we have fun and the conversations are great. And there's growth conversations sprinkled in there, and there's fun conversations, and there's stupid, silly, weird conversations. And we laugh at it all.
And that's part of your origin story, is the weird, unexpected, fun, cool, exciting, road less traveled stuff that you experience. But we don't give ourselves permission because we feel like our origin story has to be a brief moment and then it's done and we're fully formed, which is not true. our origin story is something that's ongoing, and we can't create it in a vacuum.
And I think the takeaway, in the current situation is we get to look at things again with where we're at in the world today and look for those rebirth opportunities again.
Exactly.
Because everything is changing around us faster than we can even imagine some days. It's like the merry-go-round is going around, and how do I grab back onto it? Right? So if you feel like you're spinning out of control, do some weird. Do something weird. Have some fun. Laugh. And we had a whole episode about laughing, right? And letting loose and allowing yourself to laugh. It's so important.
I love hearing that story, which is why I asked it.
You've heard that story before.
I love it though. I love the fact that there's so many pieces of that story that I love. I love the fact that he did it. I love the fact that he, as a grown man, wore propeller hats. I love the fact that he noticed it and appreciated the weird. I love the permission slip to be weird and to break the mold that everyone's got for us. Like there's so many pieces of that story that are awesome. And so many pieces of this conversation that are awesome. Like this is exactly the conversation that I was hoping it would be. I've known you for a long time, and you brought exactly all the stuff that I love about you. So
I have a very similar story to that, Deena. I grew up in Michigan. And I remember coming here one summer, was probably just before I was I was 20, 21 years old. Came here for the summer. All of my cousins are all younger than I am. So they were all in their teens, early teens. And we went to Valley Fair. And I won one of those big polka dot top hats, those big foam top hats.
Okay.
I used to wear that to the club every Friday night in college.
Did you really?
I did.
Why?
And when I didn't, people would ask, "Where's the hat, man?" And it was the similar situation. Like people just laughed and like pointed and had a good time. And I was just weird with the big top hat on.
Well, and that's the thing is, once you bring your weird, which can be your skill, your gift, your talent, your wisdom, and we're all, weird is like everything else, it's a spectrum. So some people's weird is really out there, and some people's weird is really subtle. But when you bring it and people start to rely on it as a source of inspiration or comfort or permission to be, more wholehearted who they are, and you stop, it changes the flow of the world. And I think that we as humans, we had that stop. Because we all retracted, we all kind of slowed down, or our businesses changed, and we went from the liberty of being weird, unique, interesting, fun, and we went into a survival mode. Now we've proven that we can survive, that we have that resilience. And I think now is a really good time to start bringing back that social engagement, that weirdness, that curiosity, and asking people, you can say, tell me your origin story, or you can say, tell me how you built resilience through this last little bit, because people haven't had the chance to tell that story. And for some people, in order to move on, they have to tell that story. So this is a really good time, I think, if we're looking at, what can we do to make our communities stronger, our businesses better, our relationships more engaged and nourishing, is to just literally go hang out with people and say, how did you do? Let you do it. What's your best tip from getting from where you are to where you are, where you were to where you are? What can I learn from you? Tell me your story. I'm super interested. I'm curious because you're a wonderment. And let people start to bring back the new interesting parts of their curious and weird, wonderful personality that make us flourishing again. Because when we're flourishing, we have a chance to bring that.
Yeah, and especially with so many people working from home, that becomes important. John, we have a mutual friend that says once a week, get out and go be in a room with 10 people or more once a week. It's important. If you're working from home, you've got to get out of there. You've got to get out of your basement. You've got to get out of your office. You got to go be around people. Find those opportunities, whether it's networking, whether it's the coffee shop, whatever it happens to be. Change your perspective.
Absolutely.
What's weird about you, John?
I like to sleep outside in the winter.
You do. I saw
I
that.
do. I
Yes.
love it. Was
No.
yeah.
So how many times now?
You know what? I only slept outside in it once. I slept outside in it once, and then the window of opportunity slammed shut. It rained. The rain destroyed it. And so now I have to think about if I'm going to make another one or if once was enough. But it was a good reminder that the window of opportunity will open for us and it can close just as fast. So you got to take advantage of the opportunity when it comes and not wait. And that's the lesson I'll take from the Quincy this year is it was build it, dig it, sleep in it. And then the opportunity was gone. So you got to just do
and
it.
that's a bummer because you really wanted to sleep one more time out there.
Yeah. So now I have to decide if I'm going to do another one, and I might because the first one was fun. So yeah, it's good stuff.
And it's fun for me to watch and listen to your adventures. You know, like I said earlier, I'm such a fan of the podcast, but I also, follow you on the socials just because I get to see both of you, your adventures together and then your adventures individually as humans, because you do things that are different than I do. And it just creates a more expansive experience of the world for me. So I'm really grateful for you.
The opportunity to see each other's differences and appreciate them that's a lost art right now. And if we all got a little bit better at that, the world would be a lot more awesome. So yeah. Where can people find you? Like they sat in on this conversation. They loved what they heard. Where can people find you, Deena?
Outside shoveling. I'm Propeller Girl. So I literally am Propeller Girl. So you can just type that in, PROPELLERGIRL. And I have a website which will take you wherever you want to go. My socials are mostly about snow and nature and dogs. So not very much business on my socials. But if I'm on the business-based interactive things, what I try to do is just, find cool people and introduce them to other cool people, share inspiring stuff, help us get from where we are to where we want to be. And if you go to my website, I've got a book and you can download it for free. It's this one.
It's really good.
So yeah, it's got like 9 words in it. So, I mean, literally there's not very many words in it, but, I think some of the things that we talked about today, we might find that are in here. And it's not really so much of a book that you read, you kind of do it. And it's got challenges every other page. So if you're stuck for how to interact with another human because you feel like that muscle has atrophied over the last few years, go get it. It's free. And then page through it. And if there's something you think this would be an interesting conversation starter for, when I'm at work or when I'm with my buddies or sitting at the table with the fam, then I have been useful today. Yay.
And
I
with
think
that,
you've been super useful today.
Can we do this again?
yes.
Can we?
I have notes for the next conversation.
Do you? Okay, because I'm so excited. I want to talk about more with you and hear you and listen to you. And just this vibe is doing this is so, it's such an honor because I've been fangirling over you for so long. But it also lets me do what I absolutely love, is just have a conversation with people about what we can do to connect and make the place better. So please let me come back.
We will.
Hey, everyone, go get weird and make it a great day.
Deal. I will. Weirdness shall ensue. You too.
Thank
Get after
you.
it, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
That wraps it up for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for being part of the Grit Meets Growth tribe. And thanks for growing along with us and being part of this journey together. If you know someone who needs to hear the conversation we had today, please share it. If you got something out of this conversation, please leave us a review. And finally, if you want to make sure you don't miss future episodes, just remember to subscribe. We're thankful for each and every one of you. And as my co-host and good friend Chris Cathers always says, make it a great day.